Hello, everyone. So this is one of those interviews in English, and don't panic. It's really easy to switch on the subtitles, so you will have the interview translated directly on YouTube with the subtitles. So I'm going to lead you on this process. It's really simple. You go to the little wheel down there, and then you click on it, and then on the parameters, then you put the automatic translation and you put your language. So this would be French probably, and then you will have the interview with the French subtitles. So it's not perfect, but overall you will have a general idea of, well, the interview subtitles in French. Hello, Lucinda. So
Hello.
it's a pleasure to see you again and to welcome you at this online summit about healing with horses. And actually, we are colleagues. We are trained by Linda Kohanov as Epona Quest instructors. And you live near Tucson in Arizona. Um, and there you have been working in a very special way with horses, and I'm very eager to know a little bit more about your kind of work with horses. But first, maybe a few words about you, who you are, when did you meet the horses, and why did you work with them?
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Sylvain. It's really a pleasure to be here. And what an exciting summit that you're doing. So I'm really honored to be part of it.
Yeah.
So like you said, I live in Arizona and we both studied with Linda Kohanoff in the Quest system of working with horses. I have had horses as long as I can remember. So I got my first horse when I was 5 years old.
Wow.
Of course, it was, just always for fun and then competition. And so I competed quite seriously all the way through my undergraduate studies in 3-day eventing and dressage. And so I competed in the upper levels of
Wow.
eventing.
Great.
And that was just horses were always very, very, very much a part of my identity and a part of my life. Like I said, all the way through my undergrad studies. And then I did have a short break from horses. I still had a horse, but I took a short break for about 5 years
Yeah.
where I went to law school. And then, really my life changed quite a bit. I stopped spending so much time with horses or having so much time, went to law school, became an attorney. That was my first career.
Yeah.
Um, and I did that for about 10 years. And I did have a horse at the same time and was riding dressage. And probably the last 3 years, I was pretty unhappily practicing law. And so I started looking for, well, what else can I do? And I
Sure.
think I did sort of the typical make a list, take all the skills you can do as an attorney and apply it to something else. And really, nothing, everything I looked at sort of just made me feel tired. kind of like I felt as an attorney. And so I just started doing things that I was really interested in, things that just felt like a hell yes in the moment, even if I didn't know why. And so one of those things was um, I went to a retreat, a personal development retreat with horses. And this
Okay.
was with somebody who was had been trained by Linda Kohanoff also. And very rarely do you do something that is life-changing in one weekend, right? And I don't know if you sort of experienced the same thing, but to me, it was a very, very different way of working with horses.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, the activity that really was sort of one of those moments that changed everything was they had us sit in front of the horses,
Mm.
choose a horse, sit in front of the horse, and just do kind of stream of consciousness writing. And, here I was, a lawyer, very analytical, very intellectual,
Yeah.
maybe a little judgmental. And so my writing started out, I just remember, even though this was 12 or 13 years ago, I remember, writing just what the horses looked like and what this horse looked like that I ended up. And he was kind of an old horse, kind of a thin horse.
Yeah.
And I was kind of writing those thoughts. And I think, what I was writing wasn't probably very kind, but that's what my thoughts were. And then all of a sudden I started hearing this voice, and I think it was the horse's voice or it was my subconscious, but
Okay.
all of a
Like
sudden
a voice inside you, you mean?
voice inside me, and I started writing it down. But the voice was saying things like, "You're not seeing me at all." So it felt like it was sort of coming from the horse.
Okay.
I and that's just what it felt like to me. So I just went with it. And just suddenly this horse was telling me I wasn't seeing him. And then it went on to my horse that I had at the time, who was a very talented Swedish warm blood dressage horse. And then he went on to hear, "You're not seeing your horse at all. She hates dressage. She doesn't like it." And then the final part was, "You're not seeing yourself at all, right? You are
Oh,
really, you're sort of, and at the time in hindsight, I can see I was really living from that place of conditioning, that place of other people's expectations.
yes.
And somehow in this horse, in this exercise, all these things started just coming to me. And I was really taken aback. I mean, I remember it brought me to tears. And
Oh,
I get a little emotional even thinking about it now, and then all of a sudden really seeing and feeling that horse and how deeply soulful he was and how wise he was and how beautiful he was, right? Not just seeing him as, oh, he could do dressage or he could jump or this is his conformation, but really seeing the essence of that horse. And so that was like I said, it was life changing. And here I'd had a whole lifetime of horses. And I think I probably started out like that as a little girl because I got my first pony when I was 5, and my parents just said, "Don't kill yourself, clean the horse's feet, and then
yes.
just go have fun." So, the first part of my time with horses was just sort of very wild and very just the horse teaching me how to be with horses. And then I got kind of funneled into competition, funneled into jumping. And I mean, I thought I loved it at the time, but it was very reflective of, I think, what happens to a lot of people in society and culture, right? We sort of
Yes.
maybe something comes from a place of love deep inside of you, and then it gets turned into, well, you've got to be the best at it, or you've got to compete, or you've got to get some kind of external validation for what you're doing here. And
Absolutely.
really, in hindsight, that's sort of what horses became. So this weekend was pretty life changing, and then I went on and did a 14-day
Okay.
program through Quest.
And
That was
you didn't know Linda Kohanov at that time, actually.
it. I had read the Tao
Oh
Vecus.
yeah, yeah.
I had read that book, of course, so I had heard of her.
Mhm.
Um, and the 14-day program I did was actually with Carol Rausch, but it was called the EASE program. At the time, it was called EASE,
Yeah.
Epona Advanced Study Experience,
Here
and
we know it as the Now program.
the NOW program. So then Carol kind of updated that and turned that into the NOW program.
Yeah.
So, um, Yeah, so I did that program, and the first week of that program was pretty incredible. And then I came home and quit my job as an attorney without knowing exactly
Wow.
what I was going to be doing, but I just,
Okay.
it was like one of those things I didn't mean to quit, but I quit.
That's a big jump.
It's a big jump. That's a big jump, especially for somebody who was used to, as an
Yeah.
attorney, you plan everything out, you think of everything
Yes.
that could go wrong, and you try to make sure that, it's really very, you like try to control things.
My
So that,
wife is an attorney, is a lawyer,
right
so
for that,
I can relate for sure.
you can really, yeah. So it was very different, but it almost felt like something moving through me that was more powerful than sort of
Yes.
how my intellect led me through life before that. So
Mhm.
the
And so
first week,
you
I
you
oh,
quit
go
you quit your job, and and then what happened? It was a big void, a big empty space, or what happened then?
well, I mean, things just kept kind of happening the way they were supposed to happen. So that was after the first week. So, it was like the first week. Then I came home. That was in Arizona. I came back to Wisconsin.
Yes.
I agreed to stay in my job for several more months to finish a project, a trial that I was working on. But it was when I went back for the second week that I decided, um, all right, I'm gonna do this apprenticeship program that Linda offers, and I'm also gonna sell everything that I own.
Okay.
And Juilliard and I, my horse and I, are gonna move out to Arizona, and we're gonna not just do the apprenticeship, but I'm gonna immerse myself in it. And again,
Yes.
it was very much what felt right, what felt like a hell yes, and like listening to that like that piece right in front of my face that felt like a hell yes was the only way I could make these decisions. The planning that just didn't work for this because I didn't know how this was going to end up, right? It was a big leap of faith.
Right. And so you lived not very far from Linda's place, actually, if I remember well. And
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
you had your horses there, and I remember you rescued horses. You had a Mustang at the time, if I
Mhm.
remember. And
Yeah.
and so these horses came to you, and what happened actually after
Well,
this
so
big move?
yeah, so I mean, again, things kept falling into place. I found this beautiful place to live a few miles from Linda's, and I mean, just beautiful. And the owner of that property is today, 12 years later, one of my best friends. And
Yes.
so first I moved in there, and my horse actually lived at Linda's place. I had one horse at the time. And then I kind of slowly started collecting horses. So Linda had a horse there that um, I actually ended up becoming she ended up giving him to me. And I adopted a Mustang. Um, at one point I ended up with five horses. Now I'm at four. So yeah, the horses kept showing up and I just kept saying yes, really that sort of saying yes to things that were a hell yes was one of the most powerful sort of things that I learned and that I did. And I really feel like the horses have always been so much a part of me, right? From the time I was a little girl, that's been the one thing in my life that's always been like, there's no hesitation, there's no question, and so I really feel like somehow that's part of the horse wisdom that permeated my life was learning how to trust and say yes to the things that really feel like a yes. And I think that's sort of reflective of the nature of horses, right? They're not planning things out. They're not making lists of things they're going to do and not do.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that isn't important, but I think sometimes to really get in the flow of life that horses invite us to be in, sometimes we have to learn how to listen to that little voice inside of us that can be overwhelmed by logic and intellect. And the horses really helped me do that. So every horse that I acquired or every horse that chose me was kind of one of those, it didn't necessarily make sense, but it was sort of like me learning how to listen to that little voice that was like, yes, this is the one, this is one. And every single one of those horses, they've proved to be sort of essential to my continued development.
So each each horse you met had a teaching, had something to say, something to teach you, or another experience maybe,
Yeah,
and
I feel like every horse. So then, when I lived for I think 8 or 9 years in that place that I was renting down near Linda. And, as you know, it's a fairly remote area. There's not a whole lot going on, and there's a lot
yes.
of wildlife, a lot of nature. And so, really, my days and my nights were kind of spent immersed in the horses. I mean, I had my 5 horses, and then I had other horses. I had about 8 horses there that I was living with, caring for, but it wasn't just the horses. It was all the wild animals on the property. And the way, it was just this beautiful, I call it like 8 years in the desert, right? It was like sort of just learning new ways of being, new ways of interacting with your surroundings, interacting with yourself, and always kind of guided by the horses. And so it was kind of an unlearning and a learning, but those 8 or 9 years were kind of essential to what I'm doing now. And during that time, I was gentling the Mustang or working with the horses and kind of relearning how to work with horses so that they're not tools, we're not using them, but that we're really developing a relationship that's a partnership. And it is actually, it's not easy to, or at least it wasn't for me, to shift out of how you've been sort of taught and indoctrinated to do things, right? To push,
Yes.
to dominate, even gentle domination, right? To see other beings as their, as like their purpose being somehow to serve you
Hmm.
rather than you sort of being there to kind of serve them and learn from each other. And so it was kind of 9 years of sort of an unfolding and relearning and kind of getting back in touch with my heart a little bit.
Yeah. Many people say that horse touch our heart, our inner self, our authentic self, or our soul, maybe, but that soul is a very big word. And many people say that horse, and including me, that horse have something to teach us, something about the present moment, the authenticity, and yeah, and usually they come with unexpected things that they bring into our lives, and if I understand that pretty much what you experienced, and I remember you actually living in the desert. That's in the desert, definitely, with rattlesnakes and coyotes and all kind of wild animals.
Yeah, and really learning from all of them, right? But having been led there, for sure, having been led there by the horses and sort of looking back on my life and just wondering, have horses always been kind of calling out to me in this way? Like, sort of, have I been, like, just for whatever reason, somebody who can share with other people what horses seem to be offering humanity as a way of living, a way of learning how to work with instead of dominate, right? At a time in the world where that seems really important. Like if we don't learn a new way of showing up, we might sort of dominate ourselves out of existence. So,
Yes, that's a risk, and of course you live in the southwest of America, of North America, and that's a place where the cowboy culture and the rodeo culture is very prominent, actually. So I was wondering how did you get in this, culture, in this horse culture that you did not share actually.
how did I get into, you mean, how am I doing, like being
Yeah.
in the way I am with horses versus how most people around in the
Yes,
Southwest?
that's what I mean. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I ended up in a really fortunate position, I would say. So my current role, so I've moved, as you know, I no longer live down near near Linda, but I do still live in the Tucson area. But after COVID, I sort of was given an opportunity to run the equine program at a wellness resort called Miraval. Some people have heard of it. So
Yes.
this is a pretty special place where everything is geared toward wellness, everything is geared towards safety. And they have an equine program. They have one of the first wellness-centered equine programs, I think, that existed. It's almost 30 years old at this point. But when I started at this program, there's still like trail riding was definitely a big element to this program.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Like in many places in Arizona, trail riding is the big thing, of course.
yeah, so trail riding and, there's beautiful country to ride through.
Yes.
So when I interviewed for this job, it was again one of those sort of miraculous things where everything I had done over the last, the previous 9 years just kind of made me a perfect fit for this place. When I interviewed, I kind of made it a condition, I guess, that I said I would not be doing trail rides and I would like to end the riding program and to make part of what we do at Miraval, and again, these are my words, almost rebranding horses.
Okay.
So really sort of changing, we have this huge opportunity to change people's hearts and minds about what our horse is all about, right?
Yeah.
And so it didn't take long, it took a couple months, and they agreed to end the trail rides. So that was pretty exciting. We then took all the steel shoes off the horses. So all the horses are barefoot. We also have, we have a beautiful 18 stall barn. We stopped putting the horses in the barn. So now the horses are living a very kind of as natural of a lifestyle as we possibly can, living as a herd.
Yeah.
Um, as much, kind of freedom, friends, and forage as we can offer to them. And so it was actually really interesting. Miraval was sort of a perfect platform for me to kind of, because Miraval already has such a big following and is such a trusted name in wellness.
Yeah. For
Um,
those who don't know what Miraval is, it's a big resort. Well, it's a hotel basically,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I think they have like a dozen of hotels in the US, something like that.
So, well, there's three Miravals.
Oh, there are three of them.
Three
Okay,
Miravals. Yeah.
so
So there's only
it's
three.
okay.
And we're just really known for wellness. So, we have
Yes.
everything from meditation to health and fitness to outdoor adventure to astrology to, we just kind of have everything.
Yeah.
So they were on board, they embraced this idea.
Yeah.
And so so I was in this great situation where I could come from a place that already has a big following, that people sort of a trusted name.
Yes.
And they liked this idea of doing something really unique and really different with horses. And it was very much in alignment with the culture already there.
Yeah.
And so it took a little while, for people just literally say, well, what do we do with the horses if we're not riding them? And
Yes.
Miraval, to be honest, and I just want to be clear, Miraval always had equine facilitated learning. They always had personal development and leadership focused things with horses, but we just also had trail riding.
Okay.
And so we decided to make that the pure emphasis and to start promoting our horses as colleagues, as partners, educating people about the sensitivity of horses,
Yeah.
about this heart connection that we have with horses. And so I think it took a little while for that to start to catch on, but the momentum is really building. And so it's really beautiful thing. We have people who've who come to the ranch and they have no idea what horses are like. Even they've been to trail riding places where the horses want nothing to do with people, basically. And so they come to our ranch, and in general, the horses are at the fence, ready to interact with people, very curious, very, just like we know that horses are, right? Their real nature is they're
Yes.
very, very interested in connection. They seem very, very interested in people if we can connect with ourselves. So I feel like even though I'm in this sort of in the Southwest and in a place where cowboy culture is huge,
Mm.
that I sort of was in this unique position to almost start creating another stream of consciousness around horses, right? Of course, the
Yeah.
cowboy culture is still there and horses serve an important function. Um, but this is a little bit more of a, we're really focused on that heart connection with horses and what horses have to teach people, what we can learn when we stop making them do things, forcing them to do things, requiring them to do things. What can we learn about ourselves?
Yeah. Horses as a personal development practice, and not too much as a sport.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that there definitely was a transition with Miraval
Yeah.
with
There
the
was a
people there.
transition. Yeah, there was a transition period, I think, where maybe we had less people coming down to the ranch for a little while, less people because they didn't really understand,
Uh-huh.
you know, was kind of what was happening. But what I'm seeing is the whole resort kind of as the culture shifts and people start talking about what we do with the horses, people there are really proud of what we do with the horses. They're really proud to say these horses are our colleagues, right? We even have, we have sort of what we call, like different we'll have like an employee, a colleague of the month, right? So now people are starting to nominate different horses for this. So it's a
Okay.
really beautiful thing. So it's sort of like it's been shifting and opening up the hearts of the people who work at Miraval.
Yeah.
And then also seeing how that, then they get talking about that with guests. And so now I'm hearing less from people, oh, I had no idea that horses were so sensitive.
Mhm.
Now they come down and I ask them, well, why did you sign up with the class? Oh, somebody told me that horses are so intuitive and so emotional, and you can learn so much about yourself. Right? And so that's really exciting to me. I think that's just such a beautiful thing. And the other side of that is not just that we're seeing horses differently, but it's opens up a pathway for people to see themselves differently.
Yeah, definitely. And did you had any point of resistance from clients or from the hotel administration, or was it?
What was really amazing is I think when the hotel hired me, we had, before I took the job, they really knew who I was and where I
Ah,
was coming from and
yeah.
what had sort of formed me and my beliefs. And I think that I was so passionate about it that I had full support, from the person who hired me and my boss. So that was, I think, sort of key to this, but it was definitely taking a little bit of a leap, right? It was taking a
Mhm.
leap for them to agree to do that. I think that I guess I can't speak for all the guests, but of course there were some people wondering why we don't do trail rides anymore. Why don't we do that anymore? But that just becomes an opportunity to talk about like, well, why don't we do trail rides? And what do we do? What do we have to do to horses to get them to be safe? To carry beginning riders through the desert, right? I had one young couple sign up to do a private with me, and they were really excited because they just assumed they were going to be riding the horses. So on the way to the ranch, I realized they thought they were going to be riding. So I told them we're not going to be riding horses. And they were, what are we going to be doing?
Yeah.
And so I offered to let them have their money back and take them back, but they decided to give it a try.
Yeah.
I mean, by the end of the experience, the wife left saying, I don't think I'm ever going to go to another trail ride place again.
Huh.
Or ever didn't know just didn't know that horses were so intuitive and that they could connect so deeply, right? So, like, I just get shivers thinking about that, right? What an
That's
amazing
yeah.
thing to have somebody go out into the world now with that experience. And then also thinking about, well, what, how am I, because the way we traditionally treat horses is not very different to how we treat ourselves, right?
Definitely, yes. Definitely, it's the same. Yeah.
Yeah, so it also opens up this possibility that maybe we treat ourselves a little bit differently, right? We don't force, we don't push, we don't dominate our own spirits in order to fit in or do what's acceptable anymore.
Yeah. And for our viewers, do you have some examples of well, what you are doing with horses in order to stimulate this intuition
Yeah,
and so that the sensitivity of the horse really shows up?
yeah. So I think one thing I would say is that it's not just about what you're doing in that moment with the client, right? It's
Yeah.
the relationship that you develop with the horses. It's the way you take care of the horses. It's the way the horses live. It's do the horses know that you're listening to them, right? Do they know that they're invited to show up? And so that I can't emphasize how important that is because this as a specialty, I'm in a little bit of a unique position where I work so much, right? I'm working with multiple people a day. So over time you start to patterns start to emerge and you start to realize some things. So one of the things I realized is I've really started to believe in this line of work. It is really important to be a student of the horse, to understand calming signals, like understand all the general stuff, but then really get to know your horses that you're working with very, very well. And it's not that you can't work with horses you don't work with, but the experience is going to be very different. So it's very interesting. So we stopped tying the horses. That's another thing we did. The horses are free to come and go.
Okay.
The horses are not responsible for making this a good experience for somebody, right? These are all sort of founding principles,
Yeah.
foundational principles. Um, but what started to happen with our horses is you all of a sudden something clicks and they all of a sudden you realize they know what their job is, right? So even different classes, they might show up differently.
Yeah.
But when they all of a sudden realize that the two of you are working together, it is like a feeling like no other. And so we have different classes, different types of classes, I would say. We have some classes that are just purely insight based. So for those classes, I would call them, they can be very, very high impact. You can have a life-changing realization or moment in 10 minutes. Um, and so we usually, we do privates, but we oftentimes have groups of 4 to 6 people. And so for a class like that, we're just doing a very simple activity with the horse. It could be picking up the horse's foot.
Yeah.
It could be leading the horse with a halter and lead rope, or leading the horse at liberty. Really, you don't need, like, simple is better. And then we're just kind of, because we can't use force, the horse has a choice. It really comes down to how is that person showing up? What comes up for that person in relationship when they're a little bit uncomfortable? So those are what I would call sort of our high impact, insight-based classes.
Yeah.
We also have classes that are, they all have insights, but then we also have some that are skill building, right? We're actually teaching people a tool, a skill that they use to stay connected to themselves or
Yeah.
something that they can take out into the world.
Yes.
Maybe to stay more connected with their nervous system, or, we have a few different classes like that. We have some mindfulness-based meditation classes. We have a class teaching the body scan, how to get information from your body.
Yes.
So, and then we have classes that are really, I would say, just being classes, right? Where maybe we guide people through a process where they understand the difference between being in sort of that sacred space connected to your heart, or being in more of like a doing mindset. And maybe there's some art involved in that, some drawing involved with that. A lot of the times the horses kind of tell us, I love it when we have a quote unquote challenge or problem with a horse, because that usually means it's going to lead to another class, or right, like everything. Anytime the horse is showing us something, we all now try to look at it and say, well, okay, what is the horse telling us, right? It's sort of, it really, so then the horse kind of becomes the guide, and they're very, very involved in I think in how the classes develop. And it's,
Mhm.
Yeah, it's been really rewarding. And even to watch my whole team kind of get on board with that and be very interested in the same thing. So what we're doing behind the scenes is no different than what we're doing in front of people. And I think that's so important, right? It's important.
Yeah, yeah, it's absolutely beautiful to see that even in a big resort like this, and it's more like a high-end resort, I would say, and but to see that it's possible to let the horse, well, teach people, deliver their message, and,
Yeah.
uh, and I find this position you have is so precious actually
Yeah,
for
it's
this, and uh, and so maybe. Some words about the future and the evolution and how do you see the evolution of this kind of work with horses and for you and in general in the other resort in the many other places in Arizona where they do actually make trail rides so how do you see the future?
oh, that's a good question. Um, well, the future that I would like to see is that, I mean, I think it starts with each one of us, right? Each
Yes,
person who is inspired to work with horses and to be with horses, really focusing on what is your sphere of influence
yes,
and what is it that kind of lights your heart up it's really really important for each of us to kind of tune into that and pay attention and to follow that because I think that leads to those ripples, right? When we're really operating from a place of deep authenticity,
yeah,
very connected to our hearts, then people naturally, it's a little bit easier to bring other people along with us, right? And to open their hearts. And I think part of that is each of us has a responsibility to sort of start healing our own traumas and healing
yeah.
everything inside of ourselves. Working with horses is a great way to do that. Um, I think, and this is one of the hardest things for me, is to stay open and stay accepting of people who are doing things, right? People who don't have the same outlook or maybe haven't um, yet opened their eyes to what horses really have to offer, right? And to stay in a place where we might be able to where people might be influenced through our own actions or through what they're inspired to see. And so for me personally, that sort of keeps me kind of staying very, very interested or trying to improve my own skills and abilities in areas that I think might get people interested, right? So a lot of people still want to compete with
Mm.
horses. They want to
Yes,
ride horses.
yes,
So can I find ways to do that where the horse is happy and where I'm happy? That would be inspiring to other people. Um, I think I think people feeling inspired and feeling accepted and feeling safe is very, very fundamental, foundational to
yeah,
people being willing to do things differently, right? It's sort of like, well, I have to be the change that I want to see. That is
absolutely.
probably the biggest challenge, because at the same time, it's like once you see how amazing these beings are, it's very hard to see them used in any way. So, but continuing, first step, I think, is always continuing to look at our own stuff and to expand our own awareness and to show up as an example as much as possible or something that people might be inspired by. And that does not happen by pointing fingers and judging, as hard as that might be sometimes. Um, and so I would love to see just this sort of ripple of change happening. Maybe for me personally, maybe I'm going to write a book or maybe, but I think each person kind of finding their niche, the thing that they can really take responsibility for is foundational to that.
Yeah,
So I would love to see other this is a little bit hard because, it's if you're running a business and you're trying to do this as a business, like making money is, of course, important.
yeah,
But I think if people can understand, like, it's not the horse's responsibility to make money for us, right? If we're partnering with them, then the people need to learn how to show up in ways to bring in the money. Like, the people have to be responsible for the experiences that our clients are having with horses. It's not the horse's job and it's not the horse's duty. They just need to be horses. Um, so I don't know. I guess that's the best answer I have to sort of what I see happening in the future. I think that it's a kind of like I was saying before, I sort of have to look at what's right in front of my face and try to make those changes there and then watch the ripple. I'm already seeing ripples happening just based on the sphere of influence that I'm in right now. Um, I think if we try to, or if I try to think too big, or if I try to think of all the places where there's really difficult things happening, it becomes a little bit overwhelming, right?
Yeah,
Becomes trying to do
yeah.
that.
Well,
So
yeah. Mm.
yeah.
The ripple effect, yeah, but I think there is definitely something, there is a big herd maybe of people that are of the same mind. And I've been interviewing a lot of people in the US and in different places, and definitely I can recognize the core of the horses in people.
Well, and I was
But
going to say your summit is what you're doing is huge. I think this is
I don't know.
so important, right? Because this is you're sort of amplifying um, this message by having this summit,
Hopefully,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully, yes. And so maybe to close this interview, do you have any advice to some of the viewers that would like to do the same kind of work that you are doing now in a resort, actually?
Yes. So my advice, I think I would go back to learn how to listen to that little voice inside of you, right? And say yes to it. Trust your journey, trust what you're doing, say yes to it, trust that you're going to be supported. Um, get to know your horses, never stop learning, right? It's not about just going to a program and getting a certificate to do this. That's a great first step. But it's really important that we actually kind of turn ourselves over to the horses to teach us about this work as well and be willing to listen to what they have to say. Um, I think it's not always I'm so fortunate, right, to do this, to be in the position I'm in. I think the work can be um, it can be challenging if you're on your own, right, to do it. So I would say if you're on your own and you're trying to do this, work with as many people as you possibly can because it's sort of amazing what happens, right? It's like say yes, say yes, say yes, even if it's not even if at first you're not making a lot of money from it, just keep saying yes and keep working with people because that's how you find your voice, working with people and working with horses. Find your voice and then share your voice. Um, because I think that's what really draws people to you. But yeah, so learn how to listen to that inner voice, say yes to, get to know horses, get to know your horses, keep learning everything you possibly can, open yourself up every time you think you know enough, you're probably about to learn a whole bunch more. And then just do the work as much as you possibly can. And I really think this work is starting to, and horses, I mean, the message is getting out there.
Yeah.
And so, be part of this. The New York Times just did an article on Warwick Schiller and how, in this article, he talks about how
Okay.
stopped training horses. The New York Times, right? He stopped training horses and
Yes.
how now it's all about attunement. It's very inspiring. So,
Yeah.
your voice is needed in this. Everybody's voice is needed in this. So,
Yeah. Everybody's voice, and thank you very much, Lucinda. A big thank you for saying your voice and saying your message and your testimony is very, very important for the people that, you know, would like to say yes to what life presents them and work with horse and yeah, as you say, hell yes to the life.
Oh, yes. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. It's really
Thank you
always
very
a
much,
pleasure.
Lucinda. It was a big pleasure.
Okay. Take care.
Je voulais aussi vous donner des éléments pratiques pour ce sommet en ligne. Donc c'est un sommet qui est gratuit sur simple inscription comme membre de la communauté Cheval en Conscience. Vous avez le lien juste en dessous. Une communauté où il y a déjà plus de 1500 membres. Et donc vous avez la possibilité de regarder gratuitement les interviews le jour de leur diffusion. Ou alors, si vous voulez les regarder plus confortablement, au moment où vous le voulez, vous avez la possibilité d'acheter un pack replay. Donc pack replay pour le montant de 97 €. Vous avez accès à plus d'une trentaine d'interviews, plus de 35 heures d'interviews sur les chevaux médiateurs, sur les chevaux guérisseurs, avec des témoignages exclusifs de la part des nations amérindiennes, du chamanisme. On a interviewé donc cette chamane de Sibérie, et également des professionnels du cheval en France qui parlent de leur métier, comment est-ce que le cheval peut être intégré dans des pratiques de psychologie, comment il peut être intégré avec la théorie polyvagale. Donc tout ça, vous avez la possibilité d'acheter un pack replay pour regarder confortablement les interviews. Et je voulais aussi vous dire qu'une part des bénéfices de la vente de ces packs replay sera reversée à l'association Dolce. C'est une association qui est vraiment chouette, vraiment un beau travail de cette association qui crée un refuge pour les chevaux, et on a vraiment à cœur de soutenir, d'aider cette association Dolce avec Cheval en Conscience. Inscrivez-vous, c'est gratuit, n'hésitez pas et vous aurez accès gratuitement à toutes nos interviews. Voilà les amis, à bientôt. Thank you.